Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited today because it is our first episode of the Velocity Advisory Group podcast. And so I am here to welcome you to Activating Greatness, the show where we really dig into what it takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. I'm your host, Alec McChesney, and every episode we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organization. We're going to talk about the real stuff, leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness isn't a title, it's a choice. It's something you activate every single day. So thank you for listening, for showing up, and for being a part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. And I am so excited because this is truly our first episode, and we have our CEO, Dave Fechtman, here to kick us off. And Dave, I think you know that I can talk a little bit, and I'm going to get really excited. I'm going to pepper questions your way. But before we do that, would love to hear from you, if you don't mind, just giving the audience your background, maybe a little bit of the history of Velocity, history of yourself, and then we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about leading at the highest level.
I love it. Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm really excited about today. We have talked about doing a podcast for years, and we weren't organized enough. We really weren't disciplined enough probably to pull this off until you got here. So thank you for taking something that we've flirted with for a really long time and never had the structure to pull off. And we're really excited about it. So
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a little bit about me, which is probably lesser important or significant than Velocity. I am the founder of our company and really excited about where we've come over the last 13 years. And my background is from the banking industry. I was an area president for a bank. I was head of sales for another bank, and really decided at one point that I was really not a great banker, just to be truth to be told. But I really had a passion for leadership and for culture and helping people and organizations reach a higher potential than their current state. And it struck me at some point, well, why don't I do this as opposed to loans and deposits and all those fun things that our banking friends get to do. So I still love all my banking friends. I have very fond memories of that, but being able to start something special and change lives was a calling, and here we are.
I love it. I think you're already selling yourself a little bit short in that introduction. So I'm going to poke holes throughout it. But today's focus, what I really wanted to pick your brain on, is what it takes to really lead at the highest level. And we talk all the time at Velocity. You talk about leadership, you talk about strategy, culture, how difficult it can be in today's environment to be an executive team, to navigate difficult moments. I mean, we think about, we're entering 2026, the COVID-19 pandemic feels like it was 30 years ago, but we're still within that, window of time of teams adjusting and coming out of that. And so, one, thank you for spending and investing the time in this. It brings me a lot of joy, and I know we're going to have a lot of great guests on this, but wanted to start with you at the top. And I think the first question where I want to go is this perspective of leading Velocity as our CEO and also coaching CEOs. And you talked about wanting to make an impact, and you spend your days, I've seen your calendar, right? It's full. It's full of things that we're doing internally, but you're also coaching senior executives across the United States, across a lot of industries. How has being a CEO for Velocity shaped the way you coach other CEOs? And how has coaching some of those CEOs shaped the way that you interact with the team here at Velocity? And can you just talk about that dichotomy between those two thought processes that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I think I have such a major advantage over most CEOs in the fact that I get to work hand in glove with other CEOs every single
Yeah.
day. And, you know, the wisdom that I'm able to compile from working with so many great leaders and share that with other leaders is pretty humbling and pretty awesome in its own right. So as far as working with them, how it impacts velocity, I would say it's too many ways to count. Just to be
Yeah.
really candid, is um, I hear great ideas, I hear great approaches. You and I've talked a lot recently about is this your best work? Well, I picked that up from one of my coaching clients and questions that he asks of his team, and it's amazing, just using that one example is when I reflect on the things that I do every day, I stop and I pause and I ask, well, is this my best work? And
Mm.
90% of the time, it could just be a little bit better and I could do something a little bit differently. So that's one minor example of something that I was able to derive from coaching and working with others. As far as what I'm able to do and bring from my own world into others, leadership comes in so many different shapes and sizes. And one of the things I appreciate about CEOs, they're the one person in the company, and they're the only one in the company that can't just focus on one functional responsibility.
Mm.
These CEOs that I get to work with, and including myself, which is pretty humbling again to be in that group. I don't get to think about sales. I don't get to think about delivery or operations or client success. I have to think about all of them every day, as do other CEOs. So
Mm.
there's a lot of burden and responsibility, but I can tell you, you're never bored. I don't know any CEOs that I work with that wake up and think, well, what the heck am I going to do today? And ultimately, the ones who are able to have more discretionary time, whatever they do decide to do, they're making a significant and major impact on that organization, because when you've worked to the point where you've got the right systems and people in place and you have the ability to have a lot more time, everything that CEO does is accretive towards that organization's success.
Mm.
So but yeah, it's I feel like I get a cheat sheet to greatness. Our podcast is called Activating Greatness. I get a cheat sheet on what all these other amazing leaders get to do, and I get to witness and the mistakes that they make. I said, all right, well, I don't have to replicate that because I had front row seat and a box of popcorn on not to do that myself.
I love it. I could picture you with the box of popcorn going through the baseball card deck and having that conversation. You did bring up something. I promised before we went live that I might take us down a quick tangent. And I always
Really,
joke
Alec?
that
You?
I know.
Huh.
I always say I'm allowed one or two bad podcast questions. And this is one of them right out of the gates. And I'm really excited to bring it to the table in our first episode. You coach CEOs across multiple industries. And of
Mhm.
course, velocity sits in kind of the center of this within that consulting and coaching realm. And we might work with somebody at a small therapeutic company or a large pharma, construction, insurance.
Yeah.
How has, I guess, talk to me about your philosophy in I can see something that is working or not working in
Mm.
construction, be able to take that and how can we apply it to something in the life sciences or something in insurance and finance, or even for velocity, like a concept like, is this my best work, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. But
Yeah.
how do you take things from one industry to the other, or is there a silo and it's, hey, that's different, that's insurance, that's banking, there's regulations, we have to play a different ball game? What's your thought process on that?
Yeah, I'm going to answer from a CEO perspective, but the beauty of Velocity is we work with leaders at every level of an organization. We even work with frontline leaders who
Yeah.
are more in a supervisor role or a manager role. So I think what I'm about to say applies to all leaders, not just in the CEO role. But I find most leadership skills are industry agnostic. They're transferable. So there are clearly um, the CEO has to know enough about his or her industry to to make critical decisions. I mean, part of the CEO's job is to make tough decisions, but I don't think that that's reserved just for that role. I mean, you think about even in middle management, vice presidents, senior directors, they're making tough decisions all day, every day.
Mm.
So I think most skills, delegations, time management, relationship management, conflict resolution, how to make informed database decisions. None of those things are reserved just for the CEO hat. So that's one thing. But you have to be good at your industry at whatever levels. You reach a certain point. I think in certain levels of an organization, you have to be really proficient at executing a task or a role.
Mm.
But as you elevate and your career advances, you really you need to know your industry. You need to know competitive intelligence. You need to know um, all these different nuances. And now you layer in complexity like AI, and you layer in complexity. You mentioned COVID earlier, of working remotely, working co-located.
Yep.
There's just so much, the speed of change, and it's supply chain issues, tariff issues. There's at these highest of levels, you have to know your industry's impact, all these different variables that impact your industry. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, it's shaping culture, leading people,
Mm.
making important decisions. Those are the kind of the big things that leaders at certain levels need to focus on.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and I have talked about a lot of times, especially in some of these specialized industries, the individuals that are being promoted are specific and subject matter experts, whether they're
Yeah,
scientists or project
yeah,
managers, superintendents, and they keep getting promoted. And at no point has somebody talked about how to lead an effective meeting
yeah.
or how to have the proper communication and the difference between coaching and managing and what does micromanaging look like. And I think it's a really interesting perspective too.
Yeah, I have to say it's kind of nice. There's some things that keep Velocity's lights on, and one of these realities are there's been this huge, since COVID, a lot of people that were more advanced in their careers have said, you know what, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't need this stress. I don't need these headaches. What's happened is there is a knowledge gap, and one of the things that's quickly bridging that knowledge gap is AI. I mean,
Hmm.
people that think that their differentiator is industry or product wisdom or knowledge, it's not the case anymore. But what has happened is people have gotten promoted very quickly, who moved from an individual contributor into a leadership role, or in some instances, managed small teams, and they were or the best at what they did, and they just
Yeah.
got tapped on the shoulder. That's created great opportunity for us to work with our clients and help clients, because in school you don't learn a lot of these leadership skills. If they didn't have a really strong leader that invested in coaching and development, probably they were ill equipped to handle the scale and the new responsibilities. So these are things, a lot of our listeners probably heard of the Peter Principle. A lot of these things that leaders have been subjected to as they advance in their careers keeps us in business. That's where we lean on our coaching. We lean on our emerging leaders programs and some of these resources
Mm.
to help people manage through, um, probably getting promoted in many regards, very much deserve to be, but in some regards are underdeveloped, and it's not anyone's fault. It's just kind of where things are at right now, and it creates opportunity for people to take their own journey and their own career advancement, but also for the companies to invest in them.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we've talked all the time about that investment is no longer a nice to have. That investment in those individuals is becoming more and more of a priority, or they're going to leave and they're going to
Right.
find new opportunities, which I think brings me back to this comment that you made about, is this my best work? And when you shared that with the Velocity team, I was instantly enamored with it because it goes back to
Mm-hmm.
a phrase that I use often, which is good enough is neither. And they kind of fit together. And I've posted a couple of videos about this and had a lot of feedback. And I would say about 80% of that feedback has been really positive. And then there's been maybe 15-20% that are asking questions in terms of, what does that actually mean? And is that a productivity problem? And do you want me working all the time? And in preparation for this, I started to think about that comment a little bit more. And what really stands out to me is that the executive teams have to also be asking themselves that question, and they have to be living that philosophy. So even hearing you say, I ask that question to myself all the time, and 90% of the time I can do it a little bit better. And I think sometimes when those comments are made from an executive team, if there's not belief that they're also doing it, there can be that rub. And the reason I'm going on this tangent is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that executive team alignment and how important having a strong executive team and having leaders that people want to follow and believe in and trust, how all of that builds not only great leaders, but great culture that people want to work with and for. So I guess this is a really long-winded way to ask, how do you view, or I guess maybe what separates an aligned executive team that has that buy-in, that has people believing in them, and they don't think it's lip service when they say things, and maybe a team that doesn't have that alignment, and you can kind of see the fractures, whether you're in a senior management role, middle management, or you're an individual contributor. When you look up, you kind of start to ask those questions. What do you think separates those two types of teams?
I'm going to answer that.
Please.
I do want to go back to that. I watched your podcast or your video that you ran on LinkedIn on good enough is neither, and is that your best work? And I read the 80% that got it, the spirit behind it, and I read the 20%. And I don't think that folks that had issue with that are maybe much different in their way of thinking. But I will say this before I answer your executive team alignment. It's not working harder, and it's not a level of effort that determines that, but it's the quality and the importance that you put behind it. So we talked about AI earlier. It's really easy now to cheat and have AI do a lot of the heavy lifting from a writing standpoint or messaging standpoint. I find you can still very quickly pick out something that's been AI generated versus something that a human being actually put some time and effort into creating. So these aren't things around, if you're working 40 hours now, working 45 hours to put a better product out there. It's just taking care in the product or the service that you're delivering and doing it with excellence and expecting that of yourself and your colleagues and your organization. And I would love to talk about this topic for an hour, and I won't, but I hope anyone listening to this does not get offended, because it's not, hey, I want you to double down on your hours to create something that's better. It's, in construction, they say, measure twice, cut once. And that's not a work harder thing. It's just doing something a little bit better than maybe what you naturally are inclined to do. So that's at least what I apply for myself. So back to your second question. We're filibustering today, aren't we?
I love it. We knew it was going to happen. We're going to have you on. We'll get 10 episodes out, and then Dave will come back on for episode 11.
Number 11.
We'll make it a theme.
I'm going to mark my calendar for that, Alex. So, executive team alignment. A little something that a lot of people don't know. I'm actually writing a book on this topic, and I know that's not why you asked that question, but I am going to go there for a moment. It's really apparent if an executive team's not aligned, because if you look at just a little bit of degrees of separation as you go deeper into the organization, that becomes much more broad. You have functional, entire pieces of the organization that don't know how to work properly together. So I think that when we talk about this concept of alignment, we are often thinking of chemistry. We're oftentimes thinking about, do we like each other? So alignment comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. One is camaraderie and making sure that the people in the organization actually like and respect one another, and there's levels of trust, and those are kind of building blocks. But are you aligned on goals? Are you aligned on direction? And I find oftentimes organizations that don't have alignment at the top, they're not working towards a common goal. So there's no unified goal, or there's no why behind the work that they're doing. I oftentimes think that if they don't have ways to govern themselves, they're competing for resources, they're competing for talent within the organization I'm talking about. Likely the culture is not in the right place when there's a lack of alignment. So, different leadership teams go through different maturations, and we've heard of the Tuckman model: forming, storming, norming, performing. These are phases of any team, sports as well, for that matter. But when there's a lack of alignment, there are definitely cracks that become really big. And for those of you that aren't in the C-suite, or you're not part of an executive leadership team, maybe you're a part of a senior leadership team, or you manage a department of people, alignment's really, really critical. So we'll talk maybe another time, Alec, on communication and all the remedies for these things. But if you sense that things are out of alignment, guess what? Everyone else does too. Yeah. And usually people have these major blind spots that don't even really understand how out of alignment or maybe some challenged a team is. And there's ways to bring light and shine light on those things. And again, those are some of the things I love about my job, is getting to do that.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the book, because future episodes of this podcast will be you and I debriefing on the book and walking through that process. And I think that you said something there that I want to hone in on a little bit, which is if you start to have those cracks, and if one person's feeling misalignment, it's likely that 2, 3, 30, 40 people internally, depending on the size of your team, are feeling some version of that misalignment. But what I think gets missed a lot of times is, so is the client, so is the customer. And a lot of times we think about this as an internal, hey, we've got to solve this. It's an internal thing. It's a culture problem, but we'll figure it out. But the real issue a lot of times, or the way that you're going to feel it and get hit on the head, is because the clients are going to start to feel that from an external perspective. Again, whether we're talking construction, in my world, within the life sciences for the last 4 years, we heard this all the time from a services standpoint. There was misconception on who we served or what we did. And then the potential clients and customers, if you ask them, they would say the same thing. And it wasn't until you kind of got that knock on the head or that message from a revenue standpoint that you started to take some of this, I don't want to say seriously, but sometimes it's just something that we can put on the afterburners for next quarter or next year or next offsite. And then all of a sudden you see the revenue numbers go down, the book to bill go down, and we start to put the burners on in a much bigger way from that alignment as well.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, are these issues there and it's a blind spot, or are these issues there and you're neglecting them? That's kind of the first place to start. And
I love that.
If you don't know the answer to that, likely it's a blind spot.
Yeah.
And there's good news that all these things are fixable. That's the good news in this story. But addressing that blind spot's really, really critical, because it's so funny. The emperor has no clothes. There's a reason why some of these phrases exist. Is usually the higher up in the organization you go, the bigger your blind spots.
Yeah.
Because people either don't want to bring you bad news, or like we talked about a few minutes ago, you're looking at 100 different things every single day. Of course, some things are going to slip through the cracks or not get the right level of attention. But all the way down, you mentioned construction earlier, Alec. But the relationships between general contractors and their subcontractors, or, there's a lot of dynamics. You mentioned life sciences. This alignment thing is a real thing. Now, communication is one of the things that is part of this answer key. I think everyone's probably wise enough to know that to some degree, but if everyone knew how to do this right, then why is it so commonplace that people are out of alignment and teams are out of alignment, right?
Yeah.
So again, the good news is this stuff is all fixable. The bad news is that it's commonplace. So bringing intentionality to your team and being committed to fixing them is really how you're going to win the battle in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah. Well, I love the nuance of it's commonplace, but it's fixable. And we talk about some of the things that velocity brings to the table and some of the solutions or obstacles that we're trying to overcome from a communication or collaboration standpoint. It's not rocket science, but at the same time, it's kind of that take your own medicine, and you have to be intentional. You also can't set it and forget it. It's something that is practiced and repeated time and time again. And it's a decision that each leader inside the organization has to make. And, I think it's a reasonable enough segue into our next line of questioning here, which is we talked about COVID, but we've also talked about, or I want to talk about how velocity a lot of times will come in after an acquisition or after, bringing on new executive team members or the CEO finally after
some sort of change.
Yes, something happens and there is complexity to that change. And whether it's really positive or it's a negative moment, change is still change inside of these organizations, and each person is creating their own story. So I'm interested, what principles, what practices do you rely on when guiding some of these executives through those complex moments, whether again they're difficult ones or they should be exciting, but it's still adding that complexity into the day-to-day? Where do you go when these opportunities arise?
Yeah, I think one of the things, at Velocity, we do a lot around behavioral science. We use birds as a metaphor, overlaying on the DISC assessment. So I think one of it is flexing your style in these moments of change. So, not speaking about the velocity part of your question, but what for your listeners, what can they do? Well, one, lean on your superpower. If you've got, if you're generally very empathetic and you care about other people, then lean on that, because generally when you're managing through change, there's high degrees of uncertainty. People generally jump and go to the worst case scenario. Everyone's always dialed into the radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? And you have to kind of answer those questions. So the best that you can talk to the individual as opposed to the groups. And there's ways to do that. But when I feel heard and understood, or I at least know, these anxieties that I have around this change initiative are okay and they're normal. I think that's kind of a starting point. But you need to bring clarity. You need to bring, give these people a direction of what the new change is going to create or the impact of it. If there's bad news, lean into the punch. Don't skirt around it, because when you skirt around the bad news, people again go start climbing the ladder of inference, and they start telling themselves stories. And 99% of the time, it's worse than what the bad news really impact is. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but ignoring it or thinking that it's not significant, that it's really hard for people that don't have a say in that change, to not be indifferent about it. So you have to do them a favor and address it and talk about it and give clarity of what it all means.
I think the word that I put a giant asterisk next to is the clarity, right? I mean, it goes back to that thought process around clear is kind, but if there's not clarity every individual, to your point, is making up their own story, and it's also their right to be able to do that. And if you don't clear that up for them, we talk about managing each person at the individual level and the whole human being, and make work human. There's a lot of different philosophies that we're going to talk about on this podcast, but it comes back to a lot of times the ability to communicate, and we have to be able to communicate good and bad news, at the same time.
Yeah, and imagine you're leading a team of 5 people or 7 people, something like that, and there's impact, there's some sort of change, and there's 5 different stories going on. What are those 5 people going to do? One, they're going to kind of go inward and maybe insulate themselves from the harm that they perceive.
Yep.
Or they're going to start gossiping, or they're going to start, but they're not going to be indifferent about it and just kind of roll the dice and see how it goes. So as the leader, clarity is a big piece of it, right, Alec? And then listening, asking them, how is this impacting you? And what do you need to know? And maybe I can't share everything, but I'll share whatever I can. So I think two-way communication is really, really important when you're navigating through change.
Yeah. All right. Last line of questions before we get into some rapid fire. And it's a little bit of a detour that I wanted to at least ask, because this concept around momentum has come up a lot in my initial conversations, and stacking wins, right? We talk about compounding, we talk about creating momentum, protecting it, and rebuilding it when it does stall. And so I guess the line of questioning here is, what do CEOs and leaders that are listening to this need to understand about sustaining momentum over the long term? And when I'm thinking long term here, I think maybe a decade ago, long-term would have had a different perspective. And now when I talk about long-term vision, maybe you're maybe you're thinking 18 months, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. But I think about it as quarter on quarter. How can we build, protect, sustain that momentum? And if you're open to it, just kind of give what momentum actually means to you in this concept as well, Dave.
Yeah. It's funny. The book Good to Great was written a long time ago. Jim Collins did a knockout job on that book, but he talked about
great book.
There it is. There it is. He talked about sustained, meaning 20 years, to your point. I mean, that's unfathomable today. I mean, if he wrote that book today, which is a masterpiece, he'd probably be talking about 24 months, But anyways, I think, take one from Ted Lasso. You need to be a goldfish, first of all. And momentum can swing in both directions. You can have positive momentum, or you can have negative momentum. And, with the speed of change going on right now, you can't expect momentum alone to carry you forward. So you have to be looking for nuance in while you're in a momentum trajectory. But winning breeds more winning, and it's true in sports, it's true in business, and you kind of create your own tailwind or your own headwind depending on what type of momentum you're facing. And if it's a headwind, you need to pause. You need to begin leaning more on strategy than living in the moment. I've said this before. I don't quote velocity very often, but we say at Velocity that the biggest enemy of strategy is success. If I could get our own quote right. But generally you become less strategic when you're winning. You're just going to kind of ride the wave. But the reality is that because of all the change and because of the how short-lived seasonality is on everything nowadays, you have to always lean on your strategy, and you have to be very intentional about what you're doing. So I would say that if you're feeling momentum and it's a tailwind, don't take things for granted. Don't think that that's going to last forever. But take advantage of it, though. Be opportunistic, place bets, make investments, invest in your people, invest in your strategy. I think one of the major differentiators, I was going to talk about this maybe on our 11th episode,
Yeah.
is the impact of culture.
Mm.
And all those things are contributors towards tailwinds. If you're facing headwinds, you need to pause. You need to get your team together. You do need to get realigned. You probably have lost that. You've probably lost your common goal. You've begun thinking of everything as big and insurmountable. You have to start breaking things down into smaller bite-sized pieces and really focus on executing at a much smaller scale to start building that momentum, to have those small series of wins. Yeah. So a lot to this topic, Alec, but knowing where you're at, is it a still tide, or is it an incoming tide or an outgoing tide? You kind of got to know that so you can address things accordingly.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving that precursor to probably the 22nd episode when we come back and just specifically talk about momentum, because that's a conversation that I've had a lot over the last 4 years, specifically within the life sciences. So many new competitors are coming into that space. AI is changing it, and you kind of get that shiny object syndrome where all of a sudden we change one quarter, we change the next quarter, and we change 3 quarters, and none of those changes worked. And now we don't know who we are. And so to your point, you got to take that step back and say, has any of this been going towards our true north, to the vision that we actually have as a company? And if you don't have that, then all of these changes, you're just changing because you think the industry is headed in that direction, and you're not going to win in that way.
Yeah, and data, lean on what the numbers are telling you, and whatever insights and metrics that your organization considers important, pay attention to those.
Yeah,
and definitely look at trend lines. Are they up? Are they flat? Are they down? And then act accordingly. But I wish I could say that we've always been on this beautiful upward trajectory. We haven't. 23, second half of 23 and 24 were tough years for us at Velocity. We had a long season of upward positive momentum.
Yeah.
And then when you're in the middle of it, I wish I recorded this at the early part of 23, because I would listen to my own advice. You've got to find these ways to break those trends. And we did that. It was a longer kind of flat period than I was hoping for. And we've been in positive momentum since the end of 24, and we're on that. So these shifts can be long.
Yeah.
And intentionality is just really key. Paying attention to metrics and all those different things are important.
I love it. Well, we're at the end here. I've got 4 rapid fire leadership questions.
Okay.
30 seconds. Maybe I'll give you 25 seconds each. So I want quick hitters, and then we'll wrap up.
Tug on your earlobe or something when I'm at time?
Maybe I'll bring up the old timer and do a countdown, give you the 3, 2, 1. These are 4 leadership questions, just quick hitters. Number 1, what is one leadership habit that you rely on every day, no matter what?
Yeah, I'm an early riser, so it's starting your day off right. It's getting exercise in. I know people that start off by reading the Bible or whatever it is that your morning ritual is, but do something to start your day off right. And I think that if you don't know what that needs to be, that would be a good thing to it's right now it's December, so maybe do a New Year's resolution, but create habits and do them early in the day. There's decision fatigue and real things that as your day goes along, even if you're a night owl. So start off on the right foot.
I love it. Number 2, what's the most underrated skill that a leader needs to develop in order to be successful in 2025 going into 2026?
Gratitude.
Period.
Gratitude.
You went over on question 1, question 2, way under.
You didn't give me the 3, 2, 1.
You were. I loved your answer, so I was just going to let you run. Do you want to elaborate? I love the answer here, and I think it's going to surprise some people.
It's hard for a lot of people to have, and it's stressful, and it's kind of the one thing.
Yeah. Number 3, what is on the opposite side of this? What's one thing that you believe great leaders should stop doing?
Yeah, holding on to everything. It's time for you to develop your people. It's time for you to coach and mentor. It's time to delegate, but quit holding on to everything. Stop doing that. It's holding your people back. It's holding yourself back, and it's creating a lot of extra work for you and not enough work for them.
I love it. Question number 4, fourth and final one. What's the best leadership advice that you've received? And it's bonus points if you still use it.
Yeah, it's funny. I talk about this a lot with my coaching clients, but really, culture is the key competitive advantage for any organization. It's not, you can bring in people, you can spend money and get any tools or resources that you need, but culture is something that truly differentiates. It helps with recruitment, it helps with retention, it helps with discretionary effort, it helps with critical thinking and ideation and creativity and collaboration. All these things are positive byproducts of a healthy culture.
Yeah, I love that one. I go back to one of our mutual friends, Sean Blackburn, used to say that he wanted a culture where people wanted to work with you and for you. And I think the impact, again, you get to see that internally, you get to see that externally. A good culture also means that potential clients are going to be able to see through that too, which I love.
I don't know that Sean Blackburn's our mutual friend. During COVID, we went to see Spider-Man, and he was in the row behind me. And the next few days, I ended up getting COVID. So I
Wow.
blame Sean for giving me COVID.
You
So
heard it here first. I mean, I know
that's
we're going to have a lot of exciting like exclusives on the Activating Greatness podcast, but that is our
that's one of them.
first like true breaking news moment.
It is. It's old. It's old
old.
news. It's 5 years old, but it's still news nonetheless.
News is news. News is news.
Yeah.
Dave, last question for you. Who is a leader that you believe we should interview next? Somebody that is doing meaningful work that others can learn from as we grow this podcast. Who should we interview next?
Yeah, I'm biased. I mean, we have so many amazing leaders at Velocity. I imagine that they're kind of queued up, Alec. But and I'm also biased because I get to work with a lot of amazing leaders too. I have many. I think John Stenberg is somebody, CEO of Citizens Inc. I admire his commitment to self and team, and he's on this personal health journey right now. He's bringing innovation to a mature organization. He's a fairly new CEO there. But I feel bad picking one name. I can give you dozens and dozens of names, but I think John would be a fun guest.
I love it. Well, I know I'm going to reach out. We'll connect with John. I love the innovation and personal health journey. I think there's a lot that can be learned from that. And then I know you and I are going to connect on the future of the podcast and ensure that every 10 episodes Dave comes back on to continues to tell this story. We're obviously going to detail out the book in a great way. But to your point, this podcast has been a thought for Velocity for a long time because of all of the leaders that we interact with and also the leaders who we don't know yet that we know are making a big impact inside of their teams in the lives of the humans that they work with, the organizations, the communities. And our goal is really to shed a light on those individuals, their processes, and really become, a learning institution for a lot of these stories. So I couldn't be more thankful, one, for you giving me the ability to have these conversations. The journalist in me is very happy, but also for you being the first guest on this endeavor and kicking us off in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, you can back me up on this. I actually didn't know I was the first guest until moments before we filmed. So I am honored to be your first guest. And I can't wait to see what this series. I hope this was entertaining enough for the second episode to get some listeners, but I think we're going to do some great things, and we really are blessed as a firm to be able to work with so many creative people, even inside of Velocity, but with all of our clients. Yeah. I think the wisdom that's going to be shared through this Activating Greatness series is going to be unmatched. So thank you. Thanks for making this real.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Dave's point, if you are listening to this episode, there are already 6, maybe 7 episodes live right now that you can go and listen to of others within Velocity. And then we're starting to bring on external guests. As you are listening, you can get this on our website. You can get it on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. If you do listen somewhere where you can leave a review and a 5-star rating, I'm not going to say no to that. I need that. I need to prove that this is a good idea to Dave. But if you listen and you say, hey, I would love to connect with Alec and Dave, don't hesitate to reach out. Dave and I would love to connect. Send us a note on LinkedIn. Or if you are listening and you think, wow, my boss or my leader or I should be on this podcast to share my story, absolutely reach out to us. Maybe we'll even bring Dave on for that episode. It'll just have to be the 11th or 22nd or 33rd, and we'll bring Dave on, and the two of us will interview you together. Because again, our importance of this and our focus is just sharing stories of great leaders across industry. So, Dave, one more time, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and your expertise. And to everybody listening, thank you again. This has been the first episode of the Activating Greatness podcast.